Okay, greetings and aloha, everybody who is participating, everybody that's watching live on Facebook or wherever you may be. Welcome to this live presentation webinar on what I call the ultimate dopamine reset, reboot, and recovery process. And I'm actually just going to go ahead and take these blue blocker glasses off. As appropriate as they are for the theme of our talk here, they are a little distracting. So I'm just going to take those off and get going here. Hope everyone is doing well. I've been looking forward to doing this webinar for quite some time, and I had to push it back a couple weeks just through unforeseen circumstances in life and different things. December has been well, it's been quite a month. I think it's probably been quite a month for all of us here on planet Earth, especially in the United States. And, there's just so much going on in the world right now. So many different things we could talk about. And we don't need to talk about much of those things because our theme and topic today is going to be on what I call the ultimate dopamine reset program. And again, this is something I've been really excited to share on my Facebook wall, in my different live lectures, presentations. I've talked a lot about this idea, this concept, particularly around the topic of addiction. Most of you know that I am in the completion process right now of a book called The Addiction-Free Lifestyle. We're going to talk a little bit about that in today's today's presentation. I prepared a slideshow for everyone just to take you through kind of a fluid presentation, to take you through something of a timeline and a little bit about how I'm thinking about this dopamine reset concept, addiction, recovery, how to reboot the operating system of the body and the brain, ultimately how to become an upgraded version of human 2.0, and how to upgrade your life, how to upgrade your health, how to upgrade your brain chemistry, how to upgrade your brain as a software system. I'm going to be talking about all that. I'm going to go into detail about it, but just wanted to do a little bit of an introduction here. So for those who may not be familiar with my work, many of you are obviously, but for those who aren't, my name is Ronnie Landis. I think you got that part already. And so for about the last 10 or 11 years, I've been heavily focused in the world of holistic health, natural nutrition, organic foods. At one point, I had a heavy focus on raw living foods, vegan, vegetarian nutrition, plant-based foods, superfoods, tonic herbalism, supplementation of all kinds. And my main focus has always been about going back to nature. How do we optimize the human experience? How do we overcome long-held incurable diseases or degenerative conditions, immobilities, whether it's chronic arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, autoimmune conditions, diabetic type of conditions, digestive infections, hormonal imbalances, whatever have you. I've spent all this time really scouring the fields of holistic sciences to really uncover what's possible in the human experience, because ultimately my focus has always been about human potential, and I've taken a health perspective to human potential, because one thing I know for sure is that you can do all the psychological development work, you can do all the emotional intelligence work, and that stuff is important. The personal development work, that stuff is important. But if we don't learn how to master this physical body, and particularly the brain and the nervous system, the neuromuscular system, then none of that stuff really takes a full effect. The personal development work and the transformational principles, all the transformational work, it doesn't really take a big effect unless we learn how to function optimally in these physical bodies. And I could talk on and on about that, but that's the basic premise to everything that I've done over the last 10 or 11 years. So I'm going to get into our presentation here, and we're just going to jump right in. This is a fluid presentation. Like I said, I presented some slides here that I want to get into. So let me go ahead here and just do a quick screen share so everybody can see what I'm looking at. Okay, so the ultimate dopamine reset, reboot, recovery method, the path to inner freedom and self mastery. So that's a big statement in of itself. We'll get into that. I just want to focus in on the title, the ultimate dopamine reset, reboot, recovery method. This is a methodology and a protocol and really a lifestyle that I am continuing to develop. And it's really a methodology that I'm refining and I'm developing as really my methodology for overcoming addiction. And not just addiction as we classically know it, like some kind of substance addiction or like a pornography addiction or so many different things. We're gonna talk a little bit more about that. So I'm gonna digress from that topic just a little bit here. But this is a methodology and a lifestyle approach for transformation, for healing, for optimal performance, to finding out what's really truly possible in the human experience, in these physical bodies, when we understand the neurochemistry, the neuroscience of the brain, of the nervous system, and really how does this body work as a holistic and integrative system. And once you put all the pieces together, all the lifestyle factors, all the lifestyle pieces together, and you put everything together and you're moving in a singular direction called your goals or your visions, your dreams and aspirations for your life, what is possible? That's a question that I've been asking for many, many years. And I think that we have finally cracked the code on how to create that very practically, very realistically. And I call that the ultimate dopamine reset, reboot, recovery method. So let's move forward here. So before we jump in, I wanted to share just a little bit of a concept as an introduction. So this is the cover for my upcoming book, The Addiction-Free Lifestyle, The True Path to Inner Peace and Self-Mastery. And quite a beautiful cover. One of my dear friends who did all my book covers, the last 3 books that I've published, she did my book covers, and I just basically told her, hey, like, you know me, you know the content of the book, just use your intuitive wisdom, put something amazing together. And this is what she came up with. And I thought, wow, that is one intuitive cover right there. And that's beautiful. So really proud of that, excited to share that. And I think we're going to actually, the book should be complete by the end of this month and in the publishing process, hopefully released in mid to late February. So I'll keep you all updated on the progress of that. And the full title is going to be The Addiction-Free Lifestyle Success System, because this is a success system. This is not just a book on a topic. This is an entire lifestyle systematic approach towards freedom, towards transformation, and towards overcoming the most pervasive problem on the planet for human beings, which is addiction. So what this is all about, and this is also part and parcel to the dopamine reset, it's about exploring the origins and causation of what we call addiction and all of the ways that it manifests in our lives, as well as the proven methods and protocols for overcoming addictive habits, subconscious belief systems, patterns, biochemical dependencies, aka dopamine dependencies, and quote unquote emotional blocks, which usually has to do with some kind of trauma, some kind of traumatic event that's happened in our life, usually in our childhood, that's created an emotional stuckness, an emotional block somewhere in our physical body, because our body records all the emotional deposits and it stores it in the neuromuscular system. And that's also another thing that I bring into this work is trauma release and releasing the molecules of emotion, right? There's a great book. I have it on my bookshelf. I'm not going to get it right now, but it's called The Molecules of Emotion. And it basically teaches us that our emotions are like, they create a molecular deposits in the body. And so everything that we feel, think, and believe has a physiological effect a mind-body connection. And that's a huge part of overcoming addiction. That's a huge part of this whole conversation. And maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get along. But I wanted to introduce this, not just my book. This isn't really a promotion for the book. This is a promotion for an idea. I want you to get this idea because I don't think this idea has ever been put out into the holistic health world, definitely not into the addiction recovery world. And that's why I chose this title, The Addiction Free Lifestyle. It's a lifestyle that I'm promoting. It's not a diet. It's not a cleanse or a detox program or some 21, even a 21-day dopamine detox. That's fine. That's great. But I'm not promoting something short term. I'm promoting a lifestyle of freedom. And that's what we're here to talk about. Okay, so let's jump in here. The dopamine dilemma. The biggest problem in our world right now is that most people are stuck in a dopamine feedback loop. I call this the dopamine dilemma. You could also call this the dopamine serotonin roller coaster. It's the up and down, the highs and lows. It's the feeling super, super high and then feeling super, super low. It's like the caffeinated consciousness, right? The caffeine loop where the caffeine, the coffee might get you really high, really happy, really motivated, really energetic, but come 1, 2, or 3 o'clock, then there's that dip, and then you crash, right? Usually, typically speaking, especially if somebody has a dopamine imbalance and they've been hitting the caffeine button over and over and over, and they have some kind of adrenal fatigue, kidney adrenal weakness because of that, then they get themselves stuck in the dopamine dilemma. And we're going to talk about what that is. But I wanted to read this quote that I think was just very, very telling of this whole thing. So this is by Michael Shermer, author of The Believing Brain. That's a good book. Of all the chemical transmitter substances sloshing around in your brain, it appears that dopamine may be the most directly related to the neural, like neurons in your brain, neural correlates of belief. Dopamine, in fact, is critical in association learning and the reward system of the brain that Skinner discovered through his process of operant conditioning, whereby any behavior that is reinforced tends to be repeated. A reinforcement is, by definition, something that is rewarding to the organism. That is to say, makes the brain direct the body to repeat the behavior in order to get another positive reward. Okay, so let's sit with this for a moment, because this is basically this is very telling of the dopamine dilemma phenomenon, and this is why I think this is the biggest problem in the world, and this is the source code of all addiction, by the way. Chemical addiction, emotional addiction, psychological stress-based addiction. We could talk inside and out for hours on the ins and outs of addiction by itself, but we're focusing on dopamine in this presentation, obviously, because from a hormonal, biochemical, and brain perspective, dopamine is the underpinning to all addictive tendencies. And it's also the root cause of something that we call the addicted brain. I'll talk a little bit more about the addicted brain concept as we get through this presentation. But let's focus on the dopamine dilemma a little bit more. Now, let me repeat what's said here. A reinforcement is, by definition, something that is rewarding to the organism, i.e. the brain. When he says organism, he's talking about the brain, rewarding to the brain. That is to say, makes the brain direct the body. The brain tells the body to repeat the behavior in order to get another positive reward. So, okay, so what is that saying? It's saying that the brain has its own intelligence. Now, I'm going to talk about what that means and how we upgrade the brain and how we basically upgrade the operating system as a whole. But when the brain becomes addicted, it gets addicted to these reward repetition cycles. So it basically wants to feel gratification. It wants to feel pleasure, but it does not want to feel pain or discomfort. So it has neuroplastically wired itself for immediate gratification, immediate pleasure, immediate stimulation, and it tells the brain to do those things that are going to elicit that response that produces pleasure, which tends to actually get us in trouble. It tends to put us in short-term thinking, short-term gratification, short-term reward, with the littlest amount of effort involved. And this is why people seem to have short attention spans. Social media, for example, is a big part of this. And we could talk in and out about that and that whole program. But this is really the source code of how all addictions function in the brain. So let's move on here. Okay, now let's talk about the dopamine feedback loop. This is essentially what's going on with most of us, to varying degrees, some less, some more. These are some of the symptoms that I put together so you can start to self-diagnose if you may have a dopamine imbalance. What are some of the symptoms that emerge? Well, this pattern to chase pleasure and avoid pain. That's probably the biggest one. Chasing pleasure and avoiding pain. So either an avoidance or anxiousness pattern are symptoms of dopamine, serotonin imbalances. Now, real quickly here, I want you to hear something. Here's a good way to think of dopamine and serotonin, okay? Now, dopamine and serotonin are the two main neurotransmitter brain hormones that guide all of our kind of behavior, our emotional centers, our psychological centers, our thinking process, our motivation, our willpower, our sense of happiness, our fulfillment, all that kind of stuff, right? Now, here's something to think about. Dopamine is usually about anticipating the future, okay? It's usually about anticipating some kind of future idea. In the case of, let's make an example. Like, okay, if somebody has like a pornography habit, right? They, men typically, but you know, I'm not discriminating, but let's just use that example. So you have an anticipation of a future event, right? Some kind of sexual situation. In that case, there's a hyper stimulation of dopamine flooding the brain, but it's about a future, it's about a fantasy basically. It's not real, is what I'm saying. It's the mind is projecting into the future some kind of fantasy, and then that person is experiencing a flooding of dopamine. But when they actually experience either the release, right, the catharsis, the release of energy, then all that dopamine drops off, and then they actually have a crash. And then emotions like guilt and shame might start to emerge. That it may be the same as somebody has like an alcohol addiction, some kind of food addiction, some kind of, maybe tobacco or even coffee, whatever the case is, some kind of substance. There is an association with a future event, like an anticipation of the future, but when they actually have the experience, it's never as good as the fantasy of the experience, right? So the reward centers in the brain kick on and light up, but the actual experience itself is never as rewarding, and it actually creates a little bit of a dip, right? That's kind of what dopamine does in a lot of ways. It's willpower, it's motivation. So it's motivating you to do something, to go out there and do something. Serotonin, on the other hand, is really all about being in the present moment. Serotonin is about being right here, right now, in this moment. So if somebody has a serotonin deficiency, like we see with depression, what happens when somebody has depression? We put them on antidepressants, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, right? That's that's a classical form of antidepressants, opioids, all this kind of stuff. All that does is blunt out the receptor sites and actually makes the condition much worse later on. We know that by the research now. But that's how you know if there's a serotonin and dopamine imbalance. There's a neurotransmitter imbalance because there's something off, some kind of emotional disturbance, some kind of psycho-emotional disturbance But that's what serotonin is all about. It's about being here right now, content in the present moment, not in the future, not trying to get off into the future, not avoiding the moment, but being right here, right now. So, anyways, that's I wanted to just share that little bit of description. I think that's helpful to understand how these chemicals play out in our chemistry set. Okay, other symptoms: need for constant stimulation, caffeine, nicotine, social media, sugar, take your pick. Needing stimulation just to feel normal, needing to stimulate the central nervous system in the brain in order to feel normal. And this usually also comes along with feelings of general restlessness, anxiousness, anxiety, easily bored, cannot sit still, can't focus on basic tasks, can't read a book, needing this hyper stimulation just to stay engaged, kind of thing. You might think of ADHD or ADD, those kind of things. Lack of motivation, lack of enthusiasm, lack of optimism on a regular basis, day to day. Adrenal chronic fatigue, general tiredness, slower scattered thinking. Another thing about dopamine that most people don't know is that dopamine is one of the things that fuels your adrenal glands. Your adrenal glands are powered by two primary things: sodium, i.e. salt. So low salt diets are not a good thing long term, really not even a good thing short term. They don't really make any sense at all because your nervous system runs on minerals and your adrenal glands run on sodium. They run on salt. So you need that. Actually, you need salt to hydrate your body. Another topic for another day, but you also need copious amounts of dopamine for adrenaline. Adrenals produce adrenaline. Adrenaline, cortisol, two different things. Not going to get into that, but you need adrenaline because what adrenaline does is adrenaline actually adrenalizes the body and allows you to be upright. We call that a bipedal mammal. The thing that separates human beings from like a tiger or a bear or whatever, a goat, a cow, whatever, is that we don't walk on all fours because we are adrenalized. We walk bipedally, we walk on two legs, we walk upright. It's adrenaline that allows us to do that. And if we don't have enough adrenal power, i.e. dopamine, then we can start to have motor dysfunctions. You see this with like Parkinson's, for example. And what do they put Parkinson's patients on? They put them on a pharmaceutical grade L-DOPA. What is L-DOPA? Levodopa it's a precursor for dopamine. Just so you know, just so you know. I've been studying this for well over 10 years. It's like finally all coming together in this particular package, all this research on dopamine and all this stuff, the nutritional protocols, all this stuff. It's all coming together, which is like, hallelujah, thank you. But that's how your body works, based on adrenaline. You have to be able to adrenalize, otherwise you're not going to have any willpower. You're not going to be able to walk, talk, move around, and do basic functions, let alone have an optimal performance, optimal health, et cetera, et cetera. So again, adrenal chronic fatigue, general tiredness, slower scattered thinking, as well as poor sleep quality. So many people in the world are just struggling with their sleep. I mean, it's created a whole new industry in the holistic health world, and people are doing this gadget and this bed, this type of bed, and this supplement and melatonin and this and that and this. And those are all fine and well and good. But ultimately, what we're dealing with is a dopamine dilemma. So if we don't deal with the dopamine dilemma first and foremost, all these other doodads and gadgets and supplements and all this stuff is really we're just going to be chasing our tail. We have to reset the dopamine system. I'm going to be talking about that as we go along, obviously. But you got to know, if you have poor sleep quality, hard to sleep through the evening, hard to wake up refreshed in the morning, that is a symptom of a dopamine imbalance. Emotional imbalances, feelings of depression, general sadness, melancholy, pessimism, lack of fulfillment. That also goes back up to the top here, dopamine, serotonin imbalances. And I've found through putting people through the dopamine reset process as well as putting myself through the dopamine reset process, that all those kind of emotional little disturbances started to clear themselves up, right? I didn't have to go to some therapist or some psychiatrist or whatever the thing is, you know. I actually just had to get my operating system sorted out, and things started to sort themselves out from there. So if you're feeling any of these things and it's persistent and it's not going away, then that's a clear sign that we have a dopamine deficiency, dopamine depletion. The last one here that should get your attention: sexual impotency. Sexual impotency. Now, most people will not admit to this, but this is pervasive in our world for many different reasons. Loss of sexual desire, loss of erection in men, loss of willpower tied to loss of sexual potency, sexual energy. Now, I'm going to share a statistic with you that I heard from a dear friend and colleague. His name's Dr. Roy Dittman. We had a long conversation back in like 2014. So that's like 7 years ago. It's crazy. I really have been in this for a long time. And he told me that at least 50% of the population is infertile, meaning that they can't produce a child. They, like 50%. This is bad. This is 7 years ago, right? 7 years ago, I was told this. And we could go on and on about why that is: the xenoestrogens, plastics, pesticides, all that kind of stuff. But the point of the matter is that we're dealing with an issue in our society. We are dealing with not only addiction, but sexual impotency, sexual infertility, where we're not actually able to produce the next offspring. Right? I mean, you get the point. Like, I mean, maybe that's part of natural selection. Maybe that, not that I necessarily believe in that. Well, kind of on some level. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. But the point of the matter is that this whole dopamine feedback loop has a serious effect on our sexuality, on our our potency. And what that just means is that we have creative energy, we have willpower. Because this is not even about sexuality so much, it's about your willpower, because that's tied to your adrenal glands and your kidney meridian as well. So I'm going to move on from there. Again, just take a snapshot of this. Very important. If you have any of these symptoms or you've been struggling with any of this, I guarantee you the first place to start is the dopamine reset program, because it will work things out for you that maybe you've been trying to work out for a while, but maybe you still have certain habits that are creating a deficit, kind of like robbing Peter to pay Paul, doing one thing to get energy here, but robbing yourself over here. That's not going to work long term. And we're discovering that as a civilization who has become heavily addicted to dopamine feedbacking, the dopamine feedback loop. Okay, now let's get into one of my favorite topics, which is upgrading the operating system. Upgrading the operating system. So I've been talking about this idea for a number of years now, and especially in the context of both addiction and the dopamine reset concept. Ultimately, what we want to do is we want to upgrade the operating system, and that's a three-pronged, it's really a four-pronged kind of process. So I'm going to simplify this for you, and we could go really deep. I just want to keep it simple here. So the first part is the CPU processor. The CPU processor. Think of your computer, right? Your computer has a CPU processor. What is that? It's basically the brain of the whole operation. It's your brain. It's your physical brain. The CPU processor of your entire body system is the brain. Now, most people don't realize that their brain is changeable, it's malleable, it's neuroplastic. Neuroplasticity is a term in neuroscience to basically explain how the brain reforms and shapes itself based on the informational inputs and the nutritional inputs and the movement patterns that we're practicing, rehearsing, and reinforcing every single day. So neuroplasticity is absolutely incredible, but if you don't know about it, then you might not realize that all of your patterns, habits, are all reinforcing neural pathways in the brain that are creating what's called synaptic connections and electrical bridges that bond together, and they create an electrical highway like you can see in this image right now, all this electrolytical activity. And these cross connections, these bridges, are the neuroplastic formation that's creating a bridge for all that information to cross a connect, so to speak. And that's all based on the rehearsed patterns that we do, that we partake in every single day. And I'm going to talk more about that, but that is astonishing. That is astonishing when you really realize what the brain is doing. And the brain controls everything. The brain actually controls every single activity and function in the entire body. And so that's stage one. The CPU processor, and I'm going to get more into like how to do this in a moment here. The next thing is the holistic operating system. The holistic operating system. What does that mean? It's your nervous system complex. So it's all the facets of your nervous system. So you have the brain up here, right? Okay. I think you can see my little box right here with me making gestures. So you have the brain up here, the CPU processor. Now you have the spinal cord, which is like really the electrical highway for all the nerve endings to travel through, and your motor functions, like how am I doing this right now? Moving my hands, walking, how am I talking? How am I doing any of this? It's based on your nervous system sending electrical information packets through the body. And if any of that gets disturbed or distorted or blocked, say through some kind of like injury or some kind of blockage in the body, whatever it may be, arthritis, inflammation, whatever it is, then that information is not going to be able to cross from one part of the body to another very effectively. And that's actually the case with something called diabetic neuropathy, which is the number one reason for foot amputations in the world, because there's no blood flow or electrical activity that can get from the brain to the foot. There's cloggage, let's just use that word, clottage, from the arteries and all that. And so that's a crazy thing, right? So, okay, where am I going with this? So again, nervous system complex. So ultimately what we have to do is we have to upgrade our nervous system. And that's the autonomic nervous system, which controls all the involuntary functions of our body. And the autonomic nervous system is the master switch between what's called the sympathetic system and the parasympathetic system. Now, this is really important just to make this example. You have the sympathetic system right here, which is the stress response, the fight, flight, or freeze response. And most people are stuck. They have a sympathetic overload and they're stuck in a sympathetic state. They're stuck. Their nervous system is literally stuck in a stress response. So they're always in a fear kind of fight or flight, protection, defensiveness, scarcity kind of mode, because they're always trying to protect themselves because they're always in a stress response. So part of this work is unhooking that stuck, whatever you want to call it, that stuck sympathetic bondage and getting into parasympathetic state. The parasympathetic system is what actually allows you to heal. It's what allows the body to heal. It's like rest, recovery, respiration, elimination of the organs, the elimination organs. It's actually what allows the body to heal. And if you have sleep issues, then it might be possible that you're stuck in a stress response, and we need to get you into a parasympathetic response, because that's actually what allows you to heal and repair when you go to sleep and get deep sleep. So I want to make sure that I mention that piece as well, so we have an understanding of how this kind of works. The next thing is the software programs. Okay, this is interesting. Software programs. What's that? Beliefs, belief systems, ego identities, perceptions, how we perceive the world around us. Do we perceive the world as a dangerous, hostile place? Or do we perceive the world as a loving, nurturing place? Do we perceive the universe or God or whatever idea of God is as some kind of like, malevolent, judgmental figure, or do we perceive the universe as loving and supportive? However we perceive our external reality is how we're going to experience it, right? This comes with our belief system. So, in order to actually upgrade the operating system, it's not just a physical thing, it's a psychological thing too. And it might be more psychological than just physical too. But they definitely go hand in hand for sure. And then also the ego identity. So here's something I want to share with you real quick. I had this. Let me take a drink of water real quick. So I was having a conversation with someone yesterday about addictive personalities, right? And I basically told him, I said, there's no such thing as an addictive personality. Like that's a lie, or that's a bad theory, right? There's no such thing as an addictive personality. There's only such thing as an addicted brain, right? Some people say, well, I just have an addictive personality. I just, I get addicted to certain things and whatever. Our personality, our ego identity is a construct. Who we believe we are, like I'm Ronnie Landis and I grew up a certain way and there's a certain mythology to my life and life experiences, and I was raised by a single mother and a grandmother. My father wasn't there. I'm a martial artist and an athlete. These are all stories based on life experiences, but based on stories. And just like Joe Dispenza says, 50% of what we remember, we make up. 50% of what we remember about our life is actually embellished. It's made up. We make it up based on our biases, based on unhealed trauma, right? Based on the storyline that we believe about ourselves, right? So that's important to understand. In order to upgrade the operating system, we have to cancel, clear, and delete old software programs in order to upgrade the whole system as a whole, because our belief systems could be holding our healing back. And I've seen this time and time again, and that does have a lot to do with the dopamine reset process as well. If you believe you can do it, then you can do it. If you believe you're stuck, you're a victim, and you can't complete something that you start and you're hopeless or you're a lost cause, then that's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and you won't be able to follow through on the things you need to do in order to get the results that you want. Okay. Hardware set, neuromuscular system, the final piece. So we talked about the brain, the nervous system, the belief systems. Now the hardware set is the body, the neuromuscular system. Another idea that we've been told that's not really accurate is this idea of muscle memory. Your muscles don't have memory in them, right? Your neuromuscular system has memory in it because in your musculature is nerve fibers that are moving throughout your entire muscular system, right? That's allowing you to do this. Your muscles don't do this. Your nerve firings do this, and they activate and fire through your musculature, right? Hopefully that makes sense. So as we upgrade all these other areas, we also have to upgrade the neuromuscular system. How do you do that? One part is that you have to change your movement patterns, exercise, certain types of exercise training, yoga, stretching, movement patterns. You actually have to move your body in dynamic and different ways in order to change the brain. The neuroplasticity of the brain is most changed based on movement patterns. So you got to keep moving. You got to change it up. Like there's a lot of different things that I could share with you as far as like movement patterns and stuff like that. I do a lot of that in our group Dopamine Reset program, but I just want to drive these points for you so we understand what the heck we're talking about here. The CPU processor, the holistic operating system, the software programs, and the hardware set. Okay, let's take a pause and let's move on to the next thing. Okay, now let's talk about the dopamine reset, reboot, recovery method. What is the method to this whole program that I've put together, that I'm refining, that I'm putting out into the world? Okay, well, it's a three-prong approach. It's a 6-week program, and it's a three-prong approach. So the first part is the reset. We have to reset the CPU processor. What does that mean? That means the brain, the neurotransmitters of the brain, and the nervous system itself. So if you imagine like your computer, your MacBook or your IBM or whatever it is, if you've had it on too long and it's been processing too much without a rest, you're going to need to reset it, right? Just like when you upload a new app or a new program, sometimes it tells you before the process is complete, we need to reset the computer. Well, what about this computer? This is the most complex, sophisticated computation device that's ever been devised. There is no technology that comes close to the human body. This is a biotechnology, and we have to reset this thing on a regular basis. So the first part is completely resetting the CPU, the brain neurotransmitters, nervous system. How do we do that? Well, if there is a dopamine feedback cycle going on, meaning that you have certain habits and behaviors, maybe you call it addictions, that you repeat on a daily basis that are triggering false dopaminergic, that's what's called dopaminergic stimulation, or you have weakened dopamine receptors that are not able to receive the dopamine that's coming in, then we need to reset the CPU so we can rebuild the dopamine receptors and get a healthy balance with our neurotransmitters. So essentially what I'm saying is you have to get off all the stimulants. You have to get off the caffeine, you have to get off the tobacco, get off the cannabis, get off the pornography, get off the I'm just trying to think, like the alcohol, like the sugar, right? The social media addictions. We actually have to completely reset all of that. We have to reset this thing completely. Otherwise, the brain will not be able to neuroplastically reshape itself into a healthy brain. It will still continue to be an addicted brain. And this is why, by the way, this is why people do crash course diets. They yo-yo back and forth. They do detoxes and cleanses, but it's like it keeps swinging back and forth because they haven't really changed anything. They've done something temporarily and it's like, yeah, I've gone to the infrared sauna. Like, okay, I sweated out, some of these toxins. But if I don't change my lifestyle, nothing is going to happen. It's just going to be this yo-yo. I don't want people to yo-yo anymore. I want people to transform their health for the long term. And so you have to reset the CPU. I have a whole protocol for doing that. I support people in that process. The second part, and this is where it starts to get fun. Okay, resetting is not always fun. That's where the withdrawal symptoms come and all that. That's a little challenging. Luckily, we've created a methodology for minimizing the challenge in that, in rebuilding the neurotransmitters in the brain. The second phase is rebooting the operating system. So upgrading the speed and performance of the whole body system. So, okay, so when you reset your computer, and you come back on, sometimes there's a loading phase, especially if let's say, for example, you have a Macintosh and you are upgrading the iOS, right? The operating system, right? You're upgrading to a new operating system. When you're doing that, there's a loading phase, right? Loading new information. So that's what the rebooting process is like for your brain. You have to load new information. It takes a little bit of time. That's moving through the withdrawal process. That's also changing your habits, changing detrimental habits to productive habits, exchanging unhealthful habits to healthy habits. And so your brain is loading new information. It's rebooting the whole operating system, and it's telling the body how it should function based on the new information that it's getting. That's the rebooting process. And then the third process is the recovery process. So that's where we completely recover from the old version of ourselves with the old habits, the old brain, the old laggy, laggy, fragged nervous system, the fatigue, all that stuff. And we recover, meaning we heal, we integrate all the upgrades into a brand new upgrading system. This is how you become a new person, a new version of yourself. You have a new identity of who you are. Instead of a victim, you're a victor. Instead of a loser, you're a winner, right? Like from that kind of kind of crude dichotomy, but that's usually the difference. It's that's usually how people think of themselves, whether it's conscious or unconscious. If we have repeated certain patterns through our life, those patterns have an effect on our psychology. And so the recovery process is actually recovering your true self. It's recovering who you really are, right? Underneath all those habits, underneath the self-talk, the negative self-talk, underneath all the emotional upheaval or whatever the thing is, the trauma, right? Recovering what was lost at childhood. That's how I'll say it and leave it at that. Recovering what was lost, the innocence that was lost, recovering that, integrating that, healing that, becoming a brand new version of you in a brand new body with a brand new operating system. So that in essence is the dopamine reset, reboot, recovery method in a nutshell. So let's take a look at this now. And take another sip of water here. So the addicted brain, the social dilemma of our time. This is, in my personal opinion, my observation, the biggest issue that plagues human beings in the world. It's not climate change. It's not some kind of geopolitical situation. It's not voter fraud. It's not the economy, right? It's actually everybody has an addicted brain. Everybody's suffering in some way, shape, or form. Not everyone, but most people. Having a physiological addictive brain. Their brain is physiologically addicted to substances, thought patterns, emotional loops, reinforced trauma, social media, social dynamics, toxic relationships, sugar, which is likened to cocaine, processed food, caffeine and stimulants, etc., etc. The brain itself has become addicted, and it actually becomes addicted to its own hardship. People can become addicted to their own stress. And that's actually what stress does. Stress, the more stress you reinforce, the more the brain expects stress. And so it will create situations in our lives to experience more stress because it's anticipating the stress. You see how that works? It's crazy. But this is what people are doing every single day, all day long. So let's look here. Sugar intake blunts dopamine release, just like cocaine. So this right here is a MRI imaging scan of a normal brain. This is the imaging scan of a cocaine addicted brain. And this is the imaging scan of someone who's obese. And we do know that obesity, people with obesity have different shape and a different lighting structure activity to their brain than somebody who's not. Let's look at this one. Decreased brain metabolism in drug addicts. So healthy brain right here. Take a good look at this. This is a normal, healthy, functioning brain. This is a diseased brain, a cocaine addict, apparently. And I mean, just look at the geometry of this. It looks like some little demon or some little entity or gremlin or something. It's really trippy from a metaphysical perspective. And so what we're seeing, I'm going to go down to this one on the lower right corner here. This is a little easier to tell. So functional changes, healthy brain. So you see in the back where the occipital lobe in the back of the brain and these different regions of the brain, you see how lit up these are, like neon lights, like a Christmas tree with neon lights in it. This is what a healthy brain should look like. Now, this is the addicted brain. You see, there's still little neon lights, but they're a little crude. And I don't know what that, it looks like a face in the back there. I don't know if that's a possessed brain or something. That's very strange. But I'm gonna have to like do some digger deeper digging on that one. That is a very strange picture right there. But at any effect, the brain is less active. There's less lighting, and the light that is here is actually more crude. It's it's more, yeah, it's hard to say off the out the gate, but you can see the difference. I don't even need to explain it. You can see it. And right here, these two lights right in the midpoint of the brain, right where the pineal gland is, underneath this area in the midpoint, these aren't even active. There's like no activity whatsoever. And what that tells me is that the right and left hemisphere of the brain is not connected through the corpus callosum. That's the bridge that connects the right and left hemisphere of the brain. Right here, I'm imagining that the whole brain is synchronized together, whereas in the addicted brain, it's stuck in an addiction loop. And so it's not really synchronized. It's not whole. It's just operating on a binary set of addiction programs, really. So look, this is very fascinating to really see these scans. And we understand the addicted brain as a concept, but when you see the neuroscientific research on this and the MRI imaging scans that have been done, it is conclusive. So again, the addicted brain, the social dilemma of our time, this is something that we all get to overcome in our own lives. And the dopamine reset process is, in my opinion, the way to fast track that. That's easy, it's safe, it's effective, it's fun, and it's very empowering as well. Okay, so we only have two more things to talk about here. Now, here's one of the most important kind of concepts. Creating a new reference point for feeling good, the antidote for all addictions and dopamine looping cycles. Let me say that one more time. Creating a new reference point for feeling good. This is the antidote for all addictions and dopamine looping cycles. What is a reference point? Your brain is always setting up reference points based on its experience of life, of reality, of what's going on. So for example, we talked about the dopamine looping cycle, the symptoms of a dopamine imbalance. Well, your brain has reference points for dopaminergic activity. So if you pleasure, the reward centers of the brain, feeling good, what it feels as feeling good, short-term gratification, short-term pleasure, all that kind of stuff. The more you reinforce those patterns and programs, those habits, the addiction cycles, it creates reference points in the brain for those immediate responses, those flooding of dopamine in the brain. And the brain will tell you and tell the body to do more of that, because that's its reference set. That's its reference point for what it deems as feeling good. Now, what we have to do to override this is we have to set up new reference points, right? So we have to change out the old faulty software programs. We have to change out the old faulty habitual patterns and addictive patterns. And we have to do the work to set up new reference points for what feeling good not only feels like in the moment, but what it can feel like for the rest of our life, what it can feel like for the duration of an entire day, right? These dopamine stimulations only give us a sensation temporarily for a fleeting moment, and it usually comes in with some guilt or shame or some kind of self-deprivation. That's not feeling good. That's addiction logic. That's not feeling good. That's an illusion. Feeling good is something that should follow through the course of a day and on to days and weeks and years. And it's what we call fulfillment, right? True fulfillment. So we have to set up new reference points. Now, look at the image of this individual. I'm not saying you have to do this kind of thing, but the energy of this photo is like, it's like discipline, determination, putting in the time, putting in the energy, focusing on something, right? Getting your focus back so you can focus on something long enough to get the benefits, long enough to get the results. doing healthy things, eating healthy food, drinking clean spring water, drinking green vegetable juices, superfoods, this kind of thing. These are new reference points. Exercise, movement patterns, taking cold showers instead of like, oh, I want to take a hot shower because it feels good. Well, a cold shower may not feel good in the moment, but you will feel good long after you do it. That's really what healthy things do. They may not feel good in the moment because it's not like a cocaine sugar stimulation, right? It's not this immediate comfort, but it triggers certain things in the body and the brain that create energy, long sustainable energy where you feel good long term. So we have to set up a new reference point for feeling good. And I do believe that single concept is the antidote for all addictions and dopamine looping cycles. Okay, we only got one part left here. So you can see this is a picture of me in Hawaii. This is in Kauai, Hawaii, my favorite island by far in the entire Hawaiian chain. And this is me sitting underneath the sun, underneath a waterfall, praying, because of course, that's what you do when you're underneath a waterfall. You pray, and that water was extremely cold and extremely fun, therapeutic, and beautiful. And one of my friends happened to just get a picture of that. That wasn't me posing, by the way. My friend actually just caught me in the moment, which was beautiful. Okay, so the dopamine reset is not a fad. This is important. The dopamine reset is not a fad. It's an entire lifestyle approach for human potential. So let's tie a bow and let's tie a bow on this whole thing. You are what you eat and drink. You are what you think and emote, emotions, how you feel through the day. You are what you intend and what you do. You are who you believe you are. You are pure potential. What you choose to do with your potential is exactly who you will be. What you will be is entirely based on who you choose to be now and every tomorrow onward. So choose wisely, because again, your brain is picking up all the signals of all the habits of everything that you've done, and it's neuroplastically, let's say that, rewiring itself and reforming itself and myelinating itself in the neural pathways based on what you eat and drink, what you think and emote, what you intend and what you do, who you believe you are, if you believe your pure potential or not, what you choose to do with your potential. What you will be is entirely based on who you choose to be, because that's how the brain works. That's why I say choose wisely, because it makes a difference. Okay, last thing. Okay, so obviously I wanted to talk about, at the finale of this, I wanted to share with you the upcoming 6-week guided group dopamine reset course. This is the most powerful group program I've ever put together. I've done a lot of group programs over the years. Every single one of them was much more of an investment than this is, and they've all been great, but this is hands down the most powerful thing I've ever taken a group of people through. A couple weeks ago, I just ended the first iteration of the Ultimate Dopamine Reset Program. We had 42 people in it. And the feedback and testimonials that I've received have been astonishing, just to say. Like, it has been absolutely incredible. And we are doing the next program on January 21st. That's coming up here. There's people signing up every day. We have our Facebook group support already building. And what does this include? What does it entail? 6 weeks of high-end support, resources, community, and education every day. 6 live group coaching calls. So I'm going to be doing 6 2-hour live group coaching calls with our group every single day. The calls are on a Thursday. And they're just absolutely incredible. And we break it down into the 3 phases for each 2 weeks: the reset, the reboot, and the recovery. We have a Facebook private group support container. We have a dopamine reset protocol PDF that everybody receives, and then a roadmap for integration and ongoing success beyond the 6 weeks together. The cost of the program is only $397 for the regular course and only $997 for the VIP package, which includes 2 private one-on-one coaching calls with me. So that is the end of this presentation. I highly encourage you to consider being part of our program. And if you're watching this on Facebook Live, I'll have the website put into the comments. I'll just tell you it right now. It's www.hhp, that's hhp.com/dopamine. hhp.com/dopamine. You can check out the website, has all the information, and there's student testimonials from our last program in video form. So there's video testimonials of students that have just really poured their heart out and shared their experience, which I'm incredibly humbled and honored by. And it will give you a glimpse into the power of this program and what it can do for your health and for your life. So that is the presentation. I'm gonna go ahead and stop the screen share here. Okay. So thank you so much for joining here. So what I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna keep this going live, and I'm gonna open this up to any questions for anybody that is currently in our Zoom webinar. This is your opportunity to ask any questions. There is a comment box in the below. If you want to ask a question in the comments, if you want to raise your hand and actually come on video and ask a question verbally, happy to do that too. I'm going to hold this open just for the Q&A, and we're going live still right now. So if you have any questions, please let me know in the comment box, or just raise your hand if you want to come on and ask a question live. Okay. Well, it looks like nobody has any questions in this moment. Hopefully we answered any questions that you might have had. So feel free to reach out to me if you need any more information about the Dopamine Reset Program. I'm gonna put that link here below. So I just put that into the comments here. If you have any questions or anything about that, feel free just to go to the website. And as always, excuse me, as always, you can just reach out to me through Facebook, Instagram, but Facebook's usually the easiest. I check that more. My Facebook Messenger is under Ronnie Wild if you're not friends with me already. And you can just shoot me a direct message if you want to learn more about this program, how to get involved, and all that good stuff. So I just want to thank you so much for being part of this webinar. I look forward to more in the future. And we do have one question here that I will go ahead and answer. Yeah. Okay. So Lori asks, have you ever heard of a child having a dopamine issue where depleted at age 5 as a disorder? Well, okay. So these disorders are, the medical language is just really sneaky and tricky, because when they say something is a disorder, they assume it doesn't have a cause. It's just some kind of freak genetic accident. Yes, I am aware of that. And it usually is because of some kind of epigenetic issue, from the mother, the father, and usually sometimes from the grandparents themselves, but through the mother and father's line, there's some kind of nutritional deficiency, some kind of genetic deficiency. And that can be kind of the cause of that. So just answering the question simply, yes, I have heard of that. It's not as common, but it's definitely, definitely exists. And it's something that can be worked out for sure. Just like any other dopamine issue, it's unique, and it has to do with, I think it has to do with the how do you say, the precursors for forming dopamine, right? Like some people do have a genetic issue, or some kind of like brain issue where they're not able to form dopamine properly. And so those people tend to be on like a pharmaceutical grade of L-Dopa, for example, to work that out, or to kind of keep dopamine moving. I personally believe that it can be worked out through a similar methodology as the dopamine reset and reboot process. You might need unique protocols like supplemental protocols, but ultimately I think it can be worked out just the same. That's my quick answer to that. Okay. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining me. Again, if you want to get in contact with me, Facebook is usually the easiest way. Feel free to shoot me a direct message, and I look forward to connecting more and hopefully to seeing you in the Ultimate Dopamine Reset, Reboot, Recovery 6-week program. And everyone have the best day ever. Aloha.